This was a matchup between number 2 Penn State, number 1 Miami. So some of the background on both of these teams leading into this game, both teams were undefeated at this time. Penn State had 13 guys that went to be drafted into the NFL. This was probably Vinny Testaverde's worst game. It ultimately didn't affect his draft stock at all because he went on to be the number 1 overall pick. Pretty good football player. I didn't really get an opportunity to watch a ton of Trebor Peña throughout the year. I will say that I did watch this bowl game and he did stand out. Now, did I think that he was going to be a guy to enter the transfer portal? Absolutely not. Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Road to Happy Valley. I'm your host, Noah Malone. So obviously, a lot has happened within these last few weeks and since the last episode surrounding Penn State football. So got a lot to go over in today's episode with you guys. But before I get into that, I did want to talk a little bit about the We Are in Philly event that happened the other night at the Union League of Philadelphia here in Philly. It was a phenomenal event. There was a lot of former alumni, a lot of lettermen. Saquon was there. He accepted his We Are award. Coach Franklin was there. He talked for a few minutes up there. They raffled off a lot of great items, a lot of signed memorabilia, jerseys, tickets, pictures, footballs, things along those lines. It was a really great night. Trace, Mike Gesicki, Christian Hackenberg, Grant Haley, Coach Knowles, Coach Barnes, a lot of guys were there. It was awesome. There was live music from Go-Go Gadget, and all in all, it was really special. The Union League of Philadelphia. If you've never been in this building or never heard of it, give it a Google. It's absolutely stunning. I felt like at any moment Leonardo DiCaprio or Brad Pitt was going to walk through the door. It was incredible. It's considered, I believe, like the best sporting club type situation in the city. So give it a look. It's really great. It's a really great venue. It was a great event. I really enjoyed it. So just wanted to shout that out as well. Getting into the episode now, the segment that I talked about last time along the way. So today's game is going to be one of the most important football games in Penn State history, the 1987 Fiesta Bowl, otherwise known as one of the national championship games for the Nittany Lions. So diving into it, this was a matchup between number 2 Penn State, number 1 Miami. So some of the background on both of these teams leading into this game, both teams were undefeated at this time. Penn State had 13 guys that went to be drafted into the NFL, including 2 first-round picks. That was linebacker Shane Conlon, who went 8th to the Buffalo Bills, and running back DJ Dozier, who went 14th to the Minnesota Vikings. On the Miami side of the football, they had 7 guys from this team that went on to be drafted. But just to name a few, their first-round guys were number 1 overall pick, quarterback Vinny Testaverde was selected by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Number 3 overall pick was running back Alonzo Smith, selected by the Houston Oilers. And number 9 overall pick, defensive tackle Jerome Brown, selected by my Philadelphia Eagles. So out of the top 15 picks, 5 of them were playing in this game. So there was definitely no shortage of talent in this game, no shortage of star power, the whole 9 yards. Diving into the game itself. So first quarter highlights of this game. First quarter ended in a stalemate, 0-0. It was a defensive battle early. Both teams exchanged punts throughout the first quarter and basically failed to gain any rhythm on the offensive side of the ball. Miami did move the football into Penn State territory twice, but came away with no points after the defense forced a few stops, and Miami ended up missing a 47-yard field goal. Not a super eventful first quarter, to say the least. Second quarter highlights. Miami ends up scoring first. They score on a 74-yard drive that finishes in a 1-yard touchdown run by Melvin Bratton. At this point, the Miami offense is starting to gain some rhythm. Vinny Testaverde is getting comfortable, getting settled into this game, and is starting to connect on some passes to none other than Hall of Fame wide receiver Michael Irvin. So that's great. But Penn State responded, right? They responded with their own 6-play, 74-yard drive where they converted a critical third down and a drive that was finished off with a 4-yard touchdown run by QB John Schaefer. Nothing else really happened in that second quarter, so taking it into halftime, 7-7 tie ball game. Third quarter, Miami drives into Penn State territory 3 times, but comes away with no points due to turnovers. Shane Conlon, who I mentioned earlier, the Penn State number 8 overall pick, intercepted Vinny Testaverde twice, one of them being on this drive on the Penn State 2-yard line that would have probably saved the touchdown. The Penn State offense struggled this entire game, but the defense was very, very bend, don't break, and pretty much kept them in this football game the entire time. Moving on to the third quarter, Shane Conlon forced his second interception of the game and ended up returning that deep into Miami territory, which led to a 6-yard touchdown run by none other than running back DJ Dozier. This put the Nittany Lions up 14-7. Miami responded, 30-yard field goal to make it 14-10. Penn State's still up. Miami ends up getting the football back with a couple minutes left. 1 minute left. Drives all the way down to the Penn State 6-yard line. Pete Giftopoulos picks off Vinny Testaverde for Vinny Testaverde's 5th interception of the game with 9 seconds left. That sealed the deal for the Nittany Lions. National championship, undefeated season, cementing themselves in the record books forever. Now, this was probably Vinny Testaverde's worst game. It ultimately didn't affect his draft stock at all because he went on to be the number 1 overall pick. Pretty good football player. But the Penn State defense was really the star of the show here. They forced 7 turnovers, 5 interceptions, 2 forced fumbles. I mentioned how the Penn State offense really struggled throughout this football game. Miami's defense forced 3 turnovers as well. They had 1 interception and recovered 2 fumbles. And like I mentioned earlier, Penn State's defense was the definition of bend, don't break. They were outgained on offense by nearly 300 yards, and they still figured out a way to win. Like I said, one of the most important football games in Penn State history, cemented themselves as national champions. Doesn't get much better than that. Moving on to the spring game. Hate to disappoint, but I don't have a ton on the spring game. As most of you know, the spring game was not on television, so pretty much had to just follow along with the people that were there, that were tweeting about it. I did see some clips here and there, nothing too substantial. I did see a Lyric Samuel touchdown, which was really great. But all in all, I don't have a ton on that. I personally would have loved for it to be on TV. It would have made it so much easier to follow along with. And it's not really easy for me to get out there. It's a little bit further of a drive. And with not having a place to stay, it's always tough to find spots to stay in Penn State, as I'm sure a ton of you guys know. But what I do know is that newly committed wide receiver Trebor Peña was in attendance. This leads me to one of my overall topics of this episode, where we talk about Trebor Peña. So he is a wide receiver from Syracuse. 2024 stats: 84 catches, 941 yards, 9 touchdowns. He did play a little bit of special teams. He had 15 punts. He returned 15 punts, for 120 yards, but that's about it. He didn't really do much on kickoff or anything like that. I don't really know if that's going to be so much of his role when he gets to Penn State, but the fact is he has that experience, and it just gives them another option as far as who they can put back there on punt returns and kickoff returns. I mean, who knows? Maybe we see Devontae Ross and Trebor Peña back there at some point together. So it's good to have multiple options when it comes to special teams. So we have that in Trebor Peña. So want to rattle off a couple of his best games. One of them came against number 6 Miami. He had 6 catches for 128 yards and a touchdown. He had 11 catches for 97 yards against Cal, 10 catches for 101 yards against Stanford. And then in their bowl game against Washington State, he had 5 catches for 70 yards and 2 touchdowns. Throughout the season, admittedly, I didn't watch a ton of Syracuse football. Obviously, I knew Kyle McCord. He had a pretty good season. But I didn't really get an opportunity to watch a ton of Trebor Peña throughout the year. I will say that I did watch this bowl game, and he did stand out. Now, did I think that he was going to be a guy to enter the transfer portal? Absolutely not. But here we are. And I'm not complaining, because what he adds to this Penn State wide receiver room is exactly what they needed. They needed a third guy. They needed another wide receiver to really round out this room. And I'll be honest, I think this is probably one of the best rooms that we've had in a little while here at Penn State. So he's just going to add another element. He is somewhat of a gadget guy as well. And my NFL comp for him is Detroit Lions wide receiver Khalif Raymond. Some of the things that Trebor Peña does well, he's a great route runner. He's really good getting in and out of his breaks. He's most effective in the slot, but can line up everywhere. And like I did say, he is somewhat of a gadget guy. Syracuse did use him here and there in those types of scenarios. His willingness to block stood out as well, which, as you guys know, a run-first offense, you've got to be a wide receiver that can block. And he's shown that he's capable. Another thing that I think is worth noting about him is I think he has a very high IQ. I think he did a really good job of reading whoever was covering him and stemming his routes based off of the opportunity to give him the best chance of making a play on the football and creating additional space that he wasn't able to create with his speed and with his quickness. So on top of being a great route runner, really high IQ. 2 great things to have as a wideout. If you aren't the most athletic guy, the fastest guy, you have to figure out other ways to win. And if you're going to be a great route runner and you're going to have a high IQ, you can certainly win doing that. Lastly, this was exactly what Penn State needed. He rounds out this wide receiver room. I think they have a lot of talent in there, and I don't think there's going to be any excuses for these wide receivers this year. I know a lot of people are really excited about this wide receiver room compared to what we've had in recent years. And wide receiver room was one of the big questions coming into this offseason. So he adds to that. I think he's going to play a very significant role on offense, and he just gives Drew Aller another weapon at his disposal. That leads me into our other transfer portal pickup, which was Amare Campbell a few days ago, linebacker out of North Carolina. Before I get into anything with Amare, I think it's worth noting that Dan Connor deserves the biggest shout out possible. Within these last few weeks, he's picked up a commitment out of the transfer portal from linebacker Amare Campbell, and then he's also gotten 2 commitments from 4-star linebackers in the 2026 class. Got a commitment from Matthew Lamar out of Virginia. I apologize if I butchered your name. He's a 4-star 2026 class linebacker. And then another 2026 4-star linebacker, Terry Wiggins out of Coatesville, PA. So him and his guys, they have just been putting on an absolute clinic in the linebacker room as far as bringing in talent, and he deserves the biggest shout out for that. I'm excited to see how him and the rest of the staff continue to evolve and develop that linebacker room. Diving into Amare's stats now. So 2024, he had 76 tackles, 45 of them were solo, 6.5 sacks, 1 forced fumble. My NFL comp for him is Quan Alexander. Amare is a strong open field tackler. He does give some depth to this linebacker room. He is more of a true middle linebacker. And when I say that, he's going to be in the box. He's not going to line up on the edge. He had 6.5 sacks, like I mentioned, and those all came from blitzes. So he's not going to be a guy that's going to line up and go up against a tackle on the edge. He's going to get his sacks from design blitzes and when his number's called. He flies around a field from what I've noticed, and I think he's only going to continue to get better as he works with those other linebackers and continues to get reps with Dan Connor. I know that coming into it, he is going to be more of a depth piece, but in a linebacker room that had an unexpected leave in Tamir Robinson when he transferred to USC, it really hurt the depth, to be honest with you guys. And Dan Connor and everybody went out and they answered the call. They got a linebacker out of the portal, and now they have some much better depth. And I feel a lot better as a whole about this linebacker room. In the instance that somebody does go down, I think they have a great option here in Amare Campbell. And that means that just because he's a depth piece doesn't mean he's not going to play. I do think he's going to get a bunch of snaps. I think he's going to play a ton, but obviously you need to come into these scenarios with enough guys. And when you are a team that has national championship goals like Penn State does this season, depth is a very important part because it gets long. They have to win 4 games to win a national championship, and you got to be able to have those pieces in line. So I think it's going to be a great addition. He already knows Tony Rojas. I believe he's from Virginia as well. They played together against each other back in high school. So they have that chemistry. He's familiar with somebody in this linebacker room already. And I think that's going to play a factor in him getting comfortable, him learning the defense, and him just growing as a linebacker here at Penn State. I will say the one thing I do remember, and going back onto the spring game notes, were afterwards that Coach Franklin made a specific call to action about adding another linebacker to this room. And Dan Connor and those guys really answered that call by getting Amare. He knows Tony Rojas, like I mentioned, and I think he's just going to be a great piece to add to this linebacker room. And I will say NIL commitment has been huge, and just the commitment to building a championship roster from everybody on the Penn State coaching staff has really been second to none. You can really tell how dedicated everybody is, especially to this season with all the guys that are coming back. Another year, Drew Aller. They've answered the bell on offense with bringing in a whole new wide receiver room, basically. Have a ton of guys coming back on the offensive line. 2 of the best running backs coming back in football. This is the year. I mean, I'll get into that later as I continue to go over the schedule and when I put that video out, but there's going to be some high expectations. They've answered every call as far as improving the rooms that they needed to improve through the transfer portal this offseason, and I think expectations are going to be really high, but I'm looking forward to it probably more than ever. As the season continues to get closer, I just know that my excitement, as sure as many of yours, will continue to raise, and it's gonna be great. I'm already buzzing. I'm already looking forward to this season. I'm ready for football to start, but I got to be patient. We got a whole summer to go. I appreciate you guys sticking along for the ride. That does it for today's episode. We are.